Welcome everyone to the General Assembly for 2022 on February the 26th of 2023. So the reason for pointing this particular day and time is that we want to have General Assemblies every year, but let's say in the period of February, so that we can reflect on the past year. The last General Assembly took place in August because it was our first, and we had to do it in this year. We decided to do a short period from August to February and cover that as year 2022. But it's more or less what is presented in the General Assembly of 21/22 is the fourth going on here today in the General Assembly for 22. So we finished the year 2022 with this presentation. And that's why I switch over to my nice presentation. And here we go. I hope you can see my screen. Can you?
Not yet.
Oh, sorry, I didn't share. Oh, my dear. So here we are. Now you can see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, let's roll down the list of members. Board members at the moment, Richard and Oliver. Ordinary members, the 5 as noted, and the supporting members on the right side. Today we will also not only represent what happened in the last year, 2022, and where we are going to into the next year, and also give you financial reports. We also talk about later on in a question and answer discussion we can go into if you have more questions, also about your member status, for example. So first of all, let's refocus. What is our purpose? What is Sky 360 all about? Our common ground we all work together is to establish a network of 150,000 stations that can automatically 24/7 give us sky awareness, and to record everything that moves in our skies up to low Earth orbit. So that's our big common goal that we all represent here. So when I say that this is our common goal, we have a lot of mini goals on the way there. And that's why now the year in review, we show you what mini goals we already achieved so far. So a quick overview over the community as such, because it's the Sky 360 community that is developing, building these stations, designing these stations, designing hardware, making that all come to happen and bring alive. And from this pool of community members, a certain number is also our developers or stationers, and some are both developers and stationers, and some are also core members or board members. So we have about over 1,600 people on our community right now, and I think active members is about the size of 400, and there's a big fluctuation of coming in and coming out, but I think it's increasing by about 10 people per week or so. So we have around 20 weekly visits, and about 16 new members per week, not 10, 16, sorry. And 63% coming from the US only, which is a little over representation of the US, but that's the way it is. We'd like to cover the whole planet, so we also want to go into other continents, to go into Asia and so forth, but it is also means that we also have to, let's say, represent the website in other languages as well. So that's, I think this is the most reason, because the website and most of our communication is in English. That's why the English representation is here. At the moment we are 23 stationeers, meaning that these stations are in build, are in test, are parts of developers. Some are lying on the desk, some are on the roof. So it's a mix at the moment. And but these stations, no matter whether you are a developer and a stationeer or just a stationeer, you also act as a supporting member. And that's why you have the right to attend the Channel Lawyer Assembly, and that's why you are invited for this session today. We also have some patrons and some donors on the Discord channel. On the Discord server, we have 10 public channels for a common audience, for people who just come by and have a look and maybe step out again, or decide to become a developer or a stationer with us. And for these people, we have 28 private research and development channels, every channel for each particular purpose, and special channels for internal discussions as well. And as stated here, these are restricted to developers, assistants, and stationers. Although these research and development channels can be viewed by anyone, just a small number of the research and development channels cannot. So we only have, I think, 2 who are really private channels for internal developers. And then we have 3 voice channels, and on one of these voice channels we are at the moment. So as said, Discord acts as our main developer and community exchange platform. So we mostly, let's say 80%, 90% of all communication is done on Discord. But we also use Signal as our backup channel. It can happen that Discord stalls or interrupts or whatever happens, or we're getting flushed or spammed or whatever happens to Discord, because it's a public community service platform. We use Signal as our backup channel. So we had already some situations where this was very useful. And then of course we use GitHub, where at the moment there are 30 software repos. Some are forked from other platforms, but most of them are developed by our developers. We now started to skip the project planning from ClickUp and to port it over to GitHub. For the hardware part, we collect all models that are created on the A360 platform from Autodesk. Although we recommend everyone to use Fusion 360 because it is more seamless working with all of us together on the same models. But of course you can work with all your own model software that you want, but then at the end upload again back to A360, so we have a common collection of all models that are produced or developed at certain in various versions. And then there's the Google Drive, where we host our documentation. We do, of course, weekly meetings on YouTube. We still do this, and we keep on doing this for many reasons. One reason is, of course, to have a short cycle of feedback that developers need, but also to have a record of what happened and what we did and developers were discussing, as a form of IP protection. So by publishing it and putting it on YouTube, by publishing it there, we also give a statement of when we talked what at what point in time, so that we do not face any discussions in the future with third parties. At the moment we have 25 developers on 8 teams for hard and software. So we have an all SkyCam team, which is rather busy at the moment because we're focusing mostly on the alpha version, which is covering the all SkyCam. But we're also working, of course, on the back end as such, as let's say the infrastructure. Part of this is also what on the very right top side is called the master control program, where all this communication runs is collected together. And of course, there are other groups that are already working. The GUI is already with Rebecca busy on working on the alpha. We of course have hardware that is ready for the alpha. So for the alpha, let's say we are pretty much set, I'd say, for now. We just have some, let's say, some barriers to take, or some little mountains to take, especially when it goes into let's say, the firmware and the optimization of the image that comes out of the all-sky cam sensor. So what you see here is, let's say, a sketch, a schematic of entities of the software. And on the very left top side, you see the ASC, the all-sky cam, where we develop the firmware in Rust, and to be able to upload the firmware from the processing board onto the chip on demand. So to have an update whenever we need it. Not only on boot up, for example, but anytime a new firmware update is needed for this chip, we can do it immediately. So this chip produces a stream, of course, and the stream is then pre-processed and then processed by the tracker, including the background subtractor, and producing also an output, which is then processed with kinematics, classification, image recognition on different boards, because certain processors need certain capabilities of electronics, and that's why certain parts, modules, you can say, work on particular platforms. At the end, it runs together on an event management system that collects all this data from all other sensors in the future, for now only for the all-sky cam, and decides what to do, to record or to delete, or yeah, give a notice or alert or whatever is needed. And then there's the part on the very right, that's the user interface, which this is the representation of the data, either in a live view or in a historic event view, including in the future with all tools that are needed to make local calculations, analysis, assessments. So in the last couple of months, there were several steps already taken. So let's say parts of the whole alpha is already finished. These parts are now in, let's say, in an iteration mode where they get better over a week, as much as the particular developer is working on it. But as I said before, we're waiting still that the core element of the all-sky cam and the preprocessor is working right, so that all this tracking and all these other modules working with that data is then just put on and to make it seamlessly working. So what I want to say is there are these modules that are per se, each by itself, let's say, ready to roll for the alpha version, but as long as the data stream from the camera is not perfect and not as developers Ido and Christian wants them to be, as long as that is not done yet, it is not makes not sense to throw it all together. So we have, of course, a plan to put out the alpha version by end of Q1, let's say by end of March. We'll see where we end. It's still our goal. And what I'm showing you here now is these module iterations locally. So on this one, you see a reality tracking where there's a material where a little object is flying over, and you see a tracker that keeps it in, that draws a rectangle around it and keeps that rectangle in the center, more or less in the center of the object. In this particular case, the object has dependencies, and these dependencies, and what's the reason for this particular video, is to force the tracker, or to see the tracker how it moves if an object flies in concert with other objects. The secondary picture on the right is a classification result. It is, in this case, it's derived from the kinematics behavior of a plane crossing the sky, and the kinematics module recognized that as a plane with a probability of 100%. Some developers are also going into simulation tracking because we can, of course, we already have tons of material generated by fisheye cameras, and we use that mostly to develop the software. But we, let's say, this material does not comprise all kind of objects that flies in our skies. So for certain particular objects of size and behavior and speed, whatever, we have to simulate them. As long as we have no UAP caught, we have to simulate it just to test the tracker that it is able to cover such objects. So the idea is to represent real live observations, let's say from the Nimitz case and all these observations, and put that in a simulation, see whether our tracker would be able to do the same and perform the same. So on the very first, on the left side, you see a background and an object that is simulated crossing the skies, and on the left button, little hook, you see the object, let's say in a close-up look, and always centered in the middle. That's already an iteration to the image before, but it was a little bit off the center. In the center image, the middle image, the white one is the thing without the background, just to see whether the one works and how the tracker is better with and without the background, or how good it actually works if there's a background, and even if a drastic varying background is there. And on the very right, you see a simulation of a night sky where a tiny little object like the ISS with a fraction of a pixel is moving, and you also see that the tracker is picking this up as a significant event towards the background. The another part is that these background subtractors that we use, of course, there are several, and I think at the moment we use several at the same time for particular use. So we have different light and weather situations where particular background subtractors work better than others. And even if we choose one background subtractor, its parameters would change dependent on the light of day and the weather situation. And to assess that, one developer is working on a neural network that finds out the sweet spots for every weather situation, more or less. So a neural network shall then be able to dynamically change parameters depending on the weather situation. So to always optimize the background subtractor. And you can see on the left side, you see this little black dot more or less in the center. On the right side, you see the background subtractor. So what is white is all this movement, is all this change. And also you see the black dot represented as a white dot. And the tracker has now to find out which of this is a real movement and which one is just background. So all these module software iterations are happening all in parallel. But also on the hardware side, there are developments that are, let's say, on a certain level, in a certain version level, but not, let's say, at the end of its development timeline. Some are at the end, some are not. So whatever I represent you here is a snapshot out of time, and everything is subject to change. But for now, we go for the Aloha version with a setup with a fisheye camera, a QHY-1A3 that you see in the center top, with an orange Pi 5. Then we add later on a Jetson Xavier NX HEX, and also have another orange Pi 5 as the master control program. All right. Hardware developments. one very important part was always the camera, the All-Star cam. We knew from the very beginning what the All-Star cam shall look like, or what the specs shall be. And we searched a long time, couple of months. We searched for the right combination of optic and camera. And we came to a decision where we said this setup with the Mikey 3.5mm and the QHY 183 cooled version is the right combination and the right compromise for every kind of light situation we will have on that planet. So either in night times or in daytimes. It's neither, it's like it's not meat nor fish. It's something in between. It's a good compromise that we have chosen here. So that's why some astronomers say, that's not a good setup for night skies. Or others would say that's not a good setup for day skies. But it is definitely a very good setup for all skies and all weather situations. So on the left, you see two pictures. On the left picture is when the fisheye camera is mounted on the enclosure. And on the middle image, you see it mounted on a little carrier board for the developers. And on the very right picture is the camera itself. I just want to run through some specs and explain what is important here. So this sensor is a cooled version. It means it can cool down to, I hope I'm saying this right, minus 40 degrees from the ambient, which reduces the fluctuation on the chip, which makes a more clear image with less fractal elements in it and less variations over time. The resolution we crop out is 3600 square. Although the sensor is 5500 by 3680 something, we crop out the center because it's a fisheye, and that's why we crop out a square image, a central image of 3600 square. The camera is capable of 16-bit, and we use that. Some developers already adjusted the background subtractor to work with that, and from that on, all the additional modules will also be able to work on that. So basically, the pipeline is ready to be assembled. The pixel size of this camera is 2.4 micrometers. It's a quite reasonable, good size, good as a compromise. It does not need to be that big for daytime, but it should be bigger for nighttime. But again, it's a very good compromise. Yes, it's cooled, and some developers are working on our own firmware, as I mentioned before. The optic is a Mikey 3.5mm fisheye with a 60 mm aperture and a field of view of about 220 degrees. And this 220 degrees will be projected on the 3600 square part of the camera, the sensor. The optical resolution of the Mikey itself is 2.31 arc seconds, which allows us to accomplish our benchmark goal, namely to detect and track the ISS. And what else you to see here is a plastic adapter that we were working on the last couple of months. I think it took us 2 months or even 3 months to work on that one. The idea is to have an adapter for the camera and the optic so that we only need one part to adjust both and have something that is also the mount point to have it on the enclosure or on the carrier. And we want that part to be printable by anyone with any 3D printer, no matter what quality the printer is. So that is a bit of a challenge, and we found the sweet spot, and I think we found now the right one. Yeah, still there are some printers a little bit off, and we have to work that out. But I think more or less, let's say for the 90% of printers, we have a good setup here. We have other 3D printables developed and ready for download for the STL. We already pre-produced that for our stationers who have enclosures and going to either already have built that in or going to receive that and going to build it in later on, which is the tower on the left top side that takes the ATX PSU which is mounted in a way so that the air intakes comes from the left side, sucks in and blown out vertically to the outside of the enclosure, vertically downwards. We have two add-ons so that we can add on more vent ducts for other boards. So the idea is to, whenever energy is produced, heat is produced inside the station, the enclosure, we try to move it to the outside as quickly as possible, and therefore we use these vent ducts. There's one vent duct for the Jetson boards underneath, and this one that looks like on a ship is like a vent hood on the ship. It's meant to put on a nano, and it is blowing out the wind horizontally, and which goes into horizontally into the PSU, which then blows out vertically below. On the right you see the adapter, and right below is that's a stiffening part for the first version of the version 3.7 of the enclosures, which needed that extra part as stiffener for the doors. The version 3.8 will have that already included. Just a review of what the station at the moment shall look like. A view from the inside. What you see on the left is the floor of the enclosure with the electronic boards on and all this piping and electronics attached to it. Also some sensors like the GPS sensor and the motion sensor, and of course the NAS disk to collect the data. And on the right there's a switch for all these devices. Everything is running on an Ethernet. On the right you see again the camera, and on the right button you see a little model that we did from the enclosure. So it's a mini enclosure. It's the size of a 10 centimeter 3D printed part that you can put on your table. The funny thing is it's hollow, so you can put things inside. It's closed round around, but the right part, the PTF part, you can. It's a lid on a top on a pot, so you can take it off and put something in like candies and put the lid in. It's a gimmick. You can print if you want. Although it is not part of the Aloha endeavor at the moment, some people are already working on the pan-tilt focus device, and one developer redesigned the rig into sheet metal that can easily be produced. I think the result is astounding. I like it. So a summary of the Aloha version that everyone is waiting for. We are working since October 22. We have an ETA planned for end of March, but it's planned, so anything what happens, for example, if a developer has family issues, for example, and cannot work for a month, so that will derail us here. So please be patient with us if we do not match this deadline, but we're still working on it to meet it. So the hardware is basically a power supply, a Pi 5 with 16 gig, a QHY as stated here, and a GPS dongle. On the software side, we will have a firmware for the QHY. We have an image for a Pi. It's a NixOS image that does all this image pre-processing, tracking. We now try to implement everything like the kinematics and image analysis, but if this Pi is not sufficient enough, then we will add a Jetson board as well. It also serves as archiving and the UI backend for now. We will of course support RTSP and other webcams, so people who already bought equipment shall be able to use that as well. One very important part is that we implementing ROS2 as real-time messaging system, and this decision was done in September last year, 2022. And although we were focusing in that time on having by end of September in a first version of the alpha version, we decided to go with ROS2 to have a real-time messaging system, so to turn the station into a real-time robotic system. We decided to do that, and that of course took us some developers a lot of work to rework their codes to be able to have ROS2 messaging back and forth. So that's let's say one bigger part why we are so off in time. And of course, one element is a web UI. At the moment, this is the map view where our stations are, nicely spread over the US, not that evenly spread in Europe, but that's good for itself because we have overlaps of stations in Europe and in England, in UK, and these overlaps help us for applying triangulation algorithms and work that out. So I come now to the financial statement of this report, and I will give over to Oliver.
Yeah, okay. Richard, please, give me the next slide. Thank you. I would like to report about how we dealt with money last year. Give you a rough overview. We had an income of roughly 13,500 euros. From which 5,300 euros have been donations. Some of these donations have been one-time donations for special events like the balloon start we had, and another one was a donation so that we could test a setup of a crypto wallet and a crypto exchange account if we can receive cryptos and convert it into euros properly. And so that's what we did last December, and all of this worked. So now we have a setup to get crypto donations too. We had an income of 2,000 euros out of our merchandising, from which roughly 1,000 was spent as Christmas gifts to developers. Not included into the figures of 2022 because I had to spend the money first and got it back then in 2023, but you can see this later on. We had an income from selling the first 19 enclosures of 6,000 euros. Still missing shipping costs, which are not invoiced until today. So we spent the most of this money to redesign in the tooling for the enclosures and the production for further aid. We had an interest income of 4 cents. So you can see we have no credits, no bank loans running, which I like very much. So that gives us this 4 cents. From the side of the expenses, we spent 6,800 and paid 6,800 euros, which was invested in hardware, a Mikey and a camera, a QHY for developing purposes. We spent 1,400 euros on community costs, which includes the balloon start. We had administration costs of 1,384 euros, mainly in 2022 for tax advisors, so that we could set up our shops, and the whole association was checked by a tax advisor. Our financial expenses have been 113 euros, not including the transaction costs from PayPal, which gave us an amount of 490 euros. We spent only for money transaction on PayPal, but still, it's one of the easiest ways for us to buy hardware and to transact money. So I think, unfortunately, we have to go on with this amount of money. I think it's a lot, but still worth it. We had production costs of 2,976 euros. This includes the merchandising and let me have a look. And
Enclosures.
the second 8 enclosures. Yeah. So at the end of the year, as of date 31st of December, we had our bank account stated paper 6,300, Sparkasse, our bank in Austria, 2,000, and we still have left 100 euros on MetaMask in Ethereum. The whole year brought a surplus of 6,500 euros, not mentioning the costs for the orders we gave, but still a nice surplus in the year 2022. So, if there are any questions to this, you will find a detailed report on our website on the financial year 2022, where I explained all the positions and the exact amounts. So where do they come from? Community costs, for example, the balloon start is mentioned with an exact figure, and so you could go more into detail if you like. This is my statement for 2022. And so I hand over to Clemens.
Hello, guys. All together, I'm Clemens, and together with Christian, I'm a controller of the association, and our job is kind of to double check whether the resources are taken care of with regard to the bylaws. And I would now come to the report of the controller, which I will keep as short as possible, and I will hold it. So I hereby submit that the financial report from 2022 was audited by me and by Christian and found to be in well order. And I would like to ask Christian for a statement whether he agrees or has any objections or comments on that matter.
Christian?
Oh, I'm sorry, I think you're muted.
Sorry. No, I do not have any comment about that because it was everything set up well, everything in order, no complaints.
Wonderful, thank you. So that was quite short. Let's move now to discharge of the executive board. Now, by discharging the executive board, we kind of express confidence in the executive board and thus give the go that the board will manage and has managed the association in accordance with the bylaws of the association. And I would like to ask all the supporting members whether you have any objections from the, against discharging the board, or if we can vote for discharging the board.
No objection from my side.
No objections. Wonderful, thank you so much. So I'd like to go over to discharge the executive board through the ordinary members. And I think we can hold the vote as we wish, and maybe consent by silence might be a nice way. So if there are no objections from the ordinary members, the board is considered discharged.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll hand over to Oliver again.
Yes, thank you. So I'd like to give you a short overview of our money situation as of today. It's the account balance you see in the last row is as of the 23rd of February. So in 2023 we have a very high income in the first 2 months of nearly 15,000 euros, which is based on a one-time donation in cryptos. So for that reason we set up the crypto structure last year. We had no income from enclosures and 28 euros for this shirt in merchandising articles. Our expenses were really high this year. We spent money on the enclosures, which is the production of the next badge. We still await for the tooling costs to be charged or invoiced. Merchandising, you see 19 euros, community 1,100, hardware 11,412. I think most of you know. We bought a lot of hardware, Mikey's, QHYs, and sent it out to developers for testing and development purposes. We use lending agreements for this, so we will keep it in our books, and we are confident you will do the best with this. Then we have expenses of in financial sector of 2,000 euro, which regards to a loan, a payback of a loan I granted 1.5 years ago, and it was paid back, and so thanks for that. From the outlook, we have roughly an income of monthly income of 500 euros, and against that we have monthly expenses of 60 euros, which could give us a good range of buying more hardware, not only optics and QHYs, but also other stuff we are going to develop, and I think we will save it for that. That we can reinvest the money in the community. So as you can see, PayPal was roughly 4,000 euros, Sparkasse roughly 2,000, and MetaMask Kraken is still around 100 euros. And as of today, we have a free cash flow of roughly 3,000 euros. When we deduct all the upcoming expenses, and so I think we are very good with that at present. So this is the actual status, and yeah, if there are any questions, don't hesitate to ask.
As long we are not in a minus, it is good.
Yeah, I see it the same way, and I think 3,000 in the plus is a very good situation for us to go on.
Okay, thank you, Oliver. We now come to the election of the board. As you know, the board is discharged and the controllers are discharged, and we now go with the election of the board. There are 2 nominees at the moment. If you want to nominate yourself, please go forward now. Anyone here who wants to be nominated as well?
I'll nominate Tommy.
No, wait a minute. Hold on. Wait a minute. Richard is a great target board. Let's leave it at that.
Yeah.
But Tommy, you could step in as treasurer. I wouldn't mind.
I'm really busy.
Okay.
I'm playing treasurer with 3 other companies right now.
So, as the 2 nominees are named, it's myself as the chairman and Oliver as treasurer. Let's begin with myself. I don't like to begin with myself, but I'm the first on the list. It's the nominees. The nominee Richard is now voted for being a chairman. Every one of the ordinary members is objection.
No.
Oliver?
Nope.
Christian?
Nope.
Bojan?
No.
Clemens?
Nope.
Well, let's talk about. Okay, no objection.
Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you very much for your trust. We come over to.
Doesn't mean we are trust you, but because we have no other option, bro.
Okay, I'll nominate Bojan.
No.
So, okay, I think we can settle that one. So the chairman is nominated. Is elected. The chairman, this is so weird when I call myself. Richard, am elected as chairman again.
Yay.
Do you agree?
Yeah.
Thank you. This was complicated
Where's
for
the
me.
gavel?
Sorry.
Gavel it in.
So, okay, we go on. The nominee, Oliver Coutinho, will be elected for treasurer. Any objections? Christian?
No.
Oliver? No. Bojan?
No.
Clemens?
No.
And I have also no objection. So by this, I declare Oliver as re-elected as treasurer. Thank you. Yay.
Thank you.
So, and the last thing is the election of the controllers. So we have two nominees. It's again Clemens and Christian, as they did their nice work before. Any other nominees? Please call yourself or name anyone else. Okay. So I see no one else wants to do the work. We have two nominees. Pardon me?
What's a controller? Are you talking about a comptroller?
These are the guys checking if all the recordings of the financial books are okay.
Yeah, okay. We call them comptrollers. I got it. Never mind. It doesn't matter.
Okay. Control.
You know what is the fact, Tommy? In the beginning, I was a controller. Then guys figure out that then I have so many questions, and then right now I'm out.
You can't be a controller. You know nothing.
Oh, man. You cannot make this up. Okay. Can we go back?
Yes.
So the first nominee, Clemens, will be the first controller will be elected, and Clemens is the nominee. Any objections, Oliver?
No.
Christian?
No.
Bojan?
No.
And I have also no objection. So Clemens is again elected as controller. The second nominee is Christian for the second controller. Any objections, Oliver?
No.
Clemens?
No.
Bojan?
No.
I also have no objection. So by this, I declare Christian and Clemens as elected for controllers. Thank you.
So, great.
Okay, so
Thank you too.
to finalize this presentation for today, I'll give you a quick outlook for what is planned. Development beyond the alpha. So, of course, on the software side, there will be extras like a real event management and archive management, PDF controlling guidance, of course, and additional sensors. And I'm talking about beyond the alpha. So the alpha is only the fisheye. All other sensors are beyond that. And we also have external databases that maybe it's also already part of the alpha. I don't know yet in particular. So some developers are working on this, and can happen that we already have it with the alpha, but if not, then it will go for the next version. So to have ADSB correlation either with the data from a database, an external database, or if the station has a built-in ADSB receiver. Then of course we will go into triangulation and notification warnings and some kind of climate control. The PTF is the big next thing after the fisheye and the alpha. So there's already work done on the electronics part, on the rigging and gearing. Things that are only in design is weather protection. So we also have to go there into making prototypes and testing them outside. The enclosure will also find a new iteration. It will certainly have production improvements, tool improvements even, and we also want to see whether we get better shipping rates globally. 3D printing is a very important part here. We found out we can do a lot with 3D printing for creating all kinds of adapters, mounts, even devices, boxes. We will create a download. On the curated list of hardware will be a section for downloading STLs, so anyone can download the STL along with a kind of a cover text that explains what is important for that particular STL to look for. So for example, the nozzle size or the layer height or what have you, the speed or what have you. And we will also go into pre-printed parts because we know there's a big demand in printed parts and not everyone has a 3D printer. So there is a need there, and yes, we will go there as well to have pre-printed parts that can be purchased or just done by one member helping another member. And of course, we have some sensors pre-lined up, some are already tested, some are in testing, and some are not there yet. So, but that's the lineup and the plan for going to sensors. So, just to round it up, thank you very much for attending this General Assembly. I hope we could give you a good overview of what happened last year, or let's say the time between August 22 till today. We will have the next General Assembly the same time next year, so also somewhere in February, and also have our reporting of what happened the last year, also what we could achieve if there is things that we achieved so far, traction, we all will represent it there, including the financial reports, and doing again the re-election of the board and the controllers. And so for now, I would say I stop the recording